Paris glowed at night in a way that almost felt sinful. Gas lamps burned like stars trapped in glass. Horses clicked across cobblestone streets, and cafes, salons, and theaters pulsed with the desire and scandal. It was a thrill. It was a city obsessed with spectacle, and on this particular evening, everyone in attendance believed they were about to witness something they'd never forget. Behind the velvet curtain, she waited, not nervously, never nervously, but with the calm anticipation of a woman who understood her own effect on a room. Then silk at her hips shimmered as she breathed. Gold bracelets reflected the warm stage light leaking through the fabric. Her eyes closed as if she were summoning something ancient. Then the curtain rose. The crowd silenced instantly. Not out of politeness, but instinct. She stepped forward, barefoot, decorated in jewels, veils, and shadows, and her body moved slowly, like fire spreading in controlled, intoxicating patterns. Every lift of her hand, every tilt of her head felt sacred. A ritual, not a performance. They believed her eyes told a story. They believed the dance had meaning, history, and mysticism. And she let them believe it, because belief was the beginning of control. By the time the final movement froze, the silence was thick, reverent almost. And then, all at once, applause, loud enough to shake the room. Someone whispered her name, as if they feared saying it too loud might summon something supernatural. Mata Hari. The woman. The illusion, the fantasy. She bowed slightly, never deeply, then left the stage as though she were floating, and the audience was left wanting more. Welcome to GBRLIFE Transmissions. I'm Caitlin, and you're listening to GBRLIFE of Crimes, where we explore not just what happened in crimes committed by women, but why they happened, and the psychology behind them. Today, we're stepping into the world of Mata Hari, the dancer who became a myth, the woman accused of being a spy, and the figure history still can't decide whether to fear, admire, or blame. Was she truly dangerous, or was she destroyed for refusing to be ordinary? Before she was Mata Hari, she was Margaretha Zell, born in the Netherlands in 1876. Her childhood began in privilege, with fine dresses, attention, and a father who told her that she was exceptional, and she learned early that admiration was currency. Being noticed meant being valued. But childhood doesn't protect anyone from loss. Her father's business collapsed, and almost overnight, the wealth disappeared. Shortly after, her mother, her emotional anchor, passed away. The family fractured. The comfort vanished. And for the first time, she experienced what it meant to be unseen. Psychologists might call that the origin of her persona. Later on, a fear of being powerless, and an understanding that identity could be created, not inherited. As she grew older, the world around her offered her few options. So when a newspaper advertisement appeared for a military officer seeking a wife, she answered. It wasn't love, it was escape. But escape doesn't always mean freedom. The officer, Rudolph McLeod, was older, strict, and entitled in the way men often were when the world gave them unquestioned authority. He liked discipline. He liked obedience. And what he expected from a wife was not partnership, but possession. They married quickly, and she followed him to the Dutch East Indies, now called Indonesia, where the heat was heavy and the culture was both beautiful and foreign. At first, she tried to play the role, the proper officer's wife, respectable and dignified, quiet when spoken to, and silent when she disagreed. But Margaretha was not built to be silent. She watched the local women dance, and their movements fluid and unapologetically sensual. She admired how they existed in their bodies without shame, and she saw how many men didn't ignore them, they revered them. And slowly, the seeds of reinvention began to form. And while she absorbed beauty, her marriage absorbed her. Because Rudolph drank. Then he raged, and he controlled, while he also humiliated. Their relationship rotted beneath the weight of bitterness and infidelity and violence. If Paris taught her how to command a room, Indonesia taught her another truth. Men feared the women they could not control. The only bright moment in that chapter came from the form of children, first a son, then a daughter. But even motherhood couldn't protect her from tragedy. When her son grew ill, poison under circumstances still debated, accident, revenge, negligence, he died. And her husband blamed her. And it was in that moment that something hardened inside of her. By the time she left him, she wasn't just a woman escaping a marriage. She was a woman shedding a life. She returned to Europe with almost nothing. No money, no support, no stability, and faced a society that had no real place for a divorced woman with a child. But Margaretha had learned something very powerful. If the world won't give you a place, you don't wait for permission, you invent one. She studied mirrors the way some people studied maps. She experimented with movement. She draped herself in veils and fabrics that transformed her body into something both mystical and untouchable. And when she stepped into Paris, a city hungry for novelty and vice, she no longer introduced herself as Margaretha. She introduced herself as Mata Hari, a name with no past, a body that demanded attention, and a persona built not on truth, but on desire. And Paris was starving. High society welcomed her. Diplomats, officers, politicians, powerful men. She didn't need to chase them, they chased her. She didn't need to ask questions, they volunteered information. Beauty was her entry point. Mystery was her weapon, and curiosity was her bait. Soon she wasn't just a dancer. She was a fixture in rooms where war strategies were whispered, and national secrets slipped through lips, loosened by wine and ego and infatuation. She traveled freely across borders at a time when most people couldn't cross the street without papers or scrutiny. That alone was enough to raise suspicion. But suspicion became danger when a nation needs a villain. And Europe was heading into a war where everyone eventually would be looking for someone to blame. Mata Hari may have crafted a persona to survive, but soon that persona would become the very thing that destroyed her. And that's where her story begins to shift. From seduction to surveillance, and from fantasy to fear. What happened next was not sudden. It never is. The downfall of a woman like Mata Hari doesn't happen in one moment. It happens in whispers first. War had turned Europe paranoid. Borders tightened. Loyalties became currency. People who once adored her began asking questions. Then, with growing suspicion, they asked more and more. Why did she travel so freely when others couldn't? Why did she dine with German officers one night and French ones the next? Why did she always seem to know things she shouldn't know? To the public, she was still a fascination. To intelligence officers, she was now a problem. And like many problems, she was approached, not with handcuffs, but with an opportunity. While traveling through Spain during the war, a German officer allegedly offered her money to gather information. Whether she agreed out of necessity, arrogance, or curiosity remains debated. What is known is that she accepted 50,000 francs, which at that time was a life-changing amount. But payment does not prove action, only involvement, and involvement is enough to be dangerous. Some historians argue that she never passed meaningful intelligence to anyone. Others believed she offered fragments, not secrets, but gossip dressed as usefulness. She lived off perception. Espionage was no different, but to her, it was another performance, another role. But in wartime, the difference between role and crime disappears quickly. French intelligence noticed the money. They noticed the travel. They noticed her confidence. They didn't see a woman surviving, they saw a threat. and by 1916, her movements were being tracked. Her letters were intercepted. Conversations started to be monitored, and the French she once captivated began to turn against her. Meanwhile, Mata Hari continued moving through the world as if nothing around her was really shifting, wearing furs and jewels, attending dinners with military officers and foreign dignitaries, assuming charm would always be enough. But charm works best on those who want to be charmed, and the French government no longer did. In January of 1917, the moment arrived. She returned to Paris, unaware or unwilling to accept that the tolerance for her presence had evaporated. She checked into the Hotel Palace, confident and unguarded. And there, without spectacle, without drama, the French authorities arrested her. A woman who once commanded rooms with silence now stood in a prison cell, stripped of jewels, silks, and control. She asked for explanations, but she received accusations. They claimed that she had passed critical military plans to Germans. They claimed French soldiers had died because of her. They claimed she used seduction as a weapon to betray nations. The prosecution called her the greatest femme fatale in history. The evidence suggested something far less glamorous. Hearsay, fragments, jealousy, misogyny, and desperation. But France was losing the war. Morale was collapsing. Families were grieving sons the government could not protect. They didn't need proof, they needed someone to blame. Her trial lasted just under a week. Newspapers painted her as a lethal seduction incarnate. Headlines were filled with illustrations, not of espionage, but of a half-naked dancer draped in jewels. The public wasn't reading about intelligence leaks. They were consuming a morality play. A story about a woman who dared to be free, sexually, socially, financially, and therefore deserved punishment. In court, she remained poised, elegant, controlled, not meek, not repentant. And that was her final mistake. A frightened woman could be pitied. A remorseful woman could be forgiven. A confident woman, beautiful, unashamed, untamed, could only be condemned. So she was found guilty. When the judge read the sentence of death, she didn't collapse. She didn't beg. She simply asked, "Is that all?" Execution was scheduled for October 15th, 1917. The morning was cold, and she woke before sunrise and dressed herself carefully. Stockings, gloves, a tailored coat. She refused blindfolds, restraints, and anything that suggested fear or humiliation. Witnesses said she walked towards the firing squad like a woman walking into a ballroom. When she stood before the soldiers, her voice did not tremble. Legend says she looked each man in the eyes, and in the final moment, when everything she had been was about to become legend, she lifted her chin and held her gaze. Some say she even smiled. One command, one volley of gunfire, and a woman who spent her life creating an identity larger than reality fell to the ground. No family claimed her body. No grand funeral marked the end of her story. The world moved on, satisfied with the narrative they had created. But history has a way of circling back. Decades later, documents surfaced suggesting that she was never a dangerous spy in France. At worst, she may have passed minor information, details already known through other channels. At best, she was entirely innocent, guilty only of moving through the world with autonomy, allure, and power. So the question remains, was Mata Hari a traitor? Or was she executed for being unforgettable? A woman born into a world designed to control her, who dared instead to define her. A woman who understood that identity is performance, and performance is survival. A woman whose greatest crime may have been refusing to be ordinary. History loves to paint Mata Hari as a mystery, but psychologically she wasn't mysterious at all. She was predictable, in the way that trauma survivors often are. Margaretha didn't become Mata Hari because she wanted attention. She became Mata Hari because the attention made her safe. When she was a child, praise was affection. Admiration was stability. Her father adored her, put her in fine clothes, treated her like something rare. And then suddenly, the world collapsed. Her world collapsed. Love turned into absence. Comfort turned into scarcity. The pedestal vanished. A developing mind doesn't interpret that as circumstances changing. It's interpreted as, I was valuable, then I wasn't. So I must make myself valuable again. Psychologists now call this identity compensation, the attempt to rebuild self-worth externally when it wasn't reinforced internally. Her marriage only reinforced the pattern. Love became control, affection became dependency, safety became conditional. So when she finally escaped and entered Paris, a city built on spectacle, she didn't just choose a stage, she chose a survival system. The constant gaze of others wasn't vanity, it was armor. People can't hurt you if they're busy wanting you. People can't abandon you if they're chasing you, and people can't ignore you if you become unforgettable. And this is where the line between performance and personality blurred. Not because she was deceitful, but because the persona worked better than the woman beneath it. Margaretha needed protection. Mata Hari provided it. Charm, sensuality, and mystery became her emotional currency. She didn't seduce men because she was reckless. She seduced them because being desired gave her power she never had as a child, a wife, or a grieving mother. And then came the war. A narcissistic culture, a male one, shifted the rules. The exact traits that made her celebrated in peacetime became suspicious in wartime. Men who once saw themselves as conquerors now feared being manipulated. The dancer became a distraction, the distraction became a threat, and the threat became an accused spy. From a psychological perspective, Mata Hari wasn't executed for espionage. She was executed for breaking the gender contract of her time. She lived as if her body belonged to her, as if power could be earned, not granted, as if desire flowed on her terms. To intelligence officers, that meant unpredictability. To the military, that meant danger. To the government, that meant blame. And to men who lost battles and sons, a woman who moved freely between borders, beds, and conversations was the perfect scapegoat. She was the embodiment of male fear, a woman who could not be controlled. And her trial wasn't based on evidence, it was based on projection. The psychological need to assign failure, humiliation, or fear onto someone who represented vulnerability disguised as power. The prosecutors did not fear what she did, they feared what she represented. During her final months in prison, witnesses described her behavior as strangely calm, even dignified. But psychologically, that wasn't arrogance, that was role preservation. If Mata Hari crumbled, begged, pleaded, she became Margaretha again. And Margaretha was powerless. So she died as her creation. Head high, unblinking, unafraid. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because the persona she built was stronger than the fear she carried. And maybe that is her real legacy, not espionage, not betrayal, and not seduction, but the idea that a woman could craft herself and be punished, not for the crime she committed, but for the identity she dared to claim. A woman who refused smallness, a woman who performed survival until it became identity, a woman who lived loudly in a world that demanded women be quiet. Mata Hari wasn't just executed, she was erased, not because she was guilty, but because she refused to disappear. They didn't execute a spy. They executed a woman who lived on her own terms. This has been GBRLIFE of Crimes, part of GBRLIFE Transmissions, and I'm Caitlin, reminding you that understanding the darkness helps us appreciate the light. Join me next time as we uncover another case that challenges everything we thought we knew about the criminal mind.